People hear the word lynching and they think it means a hanging, but that's not what we're talking about. Racial terror lynchings are violence, lethal violence directed at people because of their race in an effort to terrorize the entire community. Racial terror lynching is a particular kind of violence that emerges as Reconstruction collapses following the Civil War. People in the South did not believe that enslaved people, Black people, were equal. They thought they were less than human. They were subordinate, less than deserving of the rights that the new Constitution provided them. And so they began to use violence to create a system of racial hierarchy. The crimes, if you will, that Black people could be accused of were often not crimes at all. Passing a note to a white woman, not stepping off the sidewalk, laughing, not calling a white person sir or mister. These social transgressions got many African Americans killed. This violence was not directed just at the person who was murdered. It was directed at the entire African American community. It was terrorism. And for us to recover from that violence, from that terrorism, we all have to know it, and we have to deal with it. We have to address it. We have to talk about it.
"17-year-old Henry Smith was tortured for over an hour and then burned alive before 10,000 people in Paris, Texas. They sold his body parts as souvenirs. Today, there is no marker acknowledging what happened here, only an abandoned lot where this public spectacle lynching took place."
When my grandmother passed away, we ran across a little box of papers under her bed. And of course, being nosy, we picked it up, and it was clippings.
Yeah. And when I read the newspaper clipping, we discovered my grandfather was lynched in Shreveport, Louisiana, April 9th, 1912. I've never seen a picture, but I just see him being afraid of this mob, he's alone and he can't defend himself. And he most likely knows that he's going to die that day, And it's almost as if I could feel that fear. And it kind of made it real for me. And Dad was only 6 years old.
He was old enough and aware enough to realize that they murdered his dad and that they had to then run. And they changed the spelling of his last name.
Yeah.
The original spelling of Miles is M-I-L-E-S. And now we spell it M-Y-L-E-S because they were essentially trying to hide. And
that's when the family uprooted and came to California.
I think that since they were running from the authorities back in Shreveport, my dad changed his birthday in his birthplace. He was saying that he was born in San Francisco because he wanted to have had all his paperwork burned in the Great Fire. I think it was in 1906. And I just think that he felt safer having another name, another birthday. They couldn't attach him to that lynching.
A lot of the time he preferred to be in other countries, I guess, where he felt more comfortable. And that was probably a root of it.
I think my dad did not appreciate how important a father figure is in the family. I personally would have liked to have my dad around a lot more. But since he grew up with just women, his mom, his grandmother, maybe he didn't realize that, I should be more present in the family.
When you see the whole picture, the puzzle comes together. Because we always wonder, oh, he just likes Mexico better or he likes South America better. But as for raising us, I think he wanted to keep us away from the racism. And that was his way of doing it. You never know the whole story as to why.
I didn't realize that you guys only found out once your grandmother died, and then you found the clippings. I didn't even know that.
It was just known to just not ask, you know. It was speak when you're spoken to, that kind of thing. It was, if my grandmother didn't bring it up, you wouldn't bring it up either. You know what I'm saying? And my father never brought it up, and his mother certainly never brought it up. And we lived with her for periods of time.
Right now that she was mentioning that, so far I've been focusing on my grandfather. I didn't think about my grandmother's feelings. Here she is at a young age. She was all part of that too.
Yeah, she was only 26 when she became a widow.
Yeah.
If my grandmother was here today, I would ask her what it felt like when the incident happened, and why didn't she tell us about it? She missed out on a source of comfort. And I don't think we would have judged her. I think we would have felt, wow, you went through a lot, you know?
When I found out all that information, I started crying, mostly for my grandfather, the pain he went through, and then crying for my mom and her family, because I started to understand how the pain that he suffered affected his relationship with his family, how something like this can impact generations.
Men rode into Oklahoma at night and entered the mother and son were hauled by wagon 6 miles west of town and were swung from
The New York Times reported that the victims were tortured with knives before being hanged. His charred corpse was hung for public display in front of a blacksmith. Dead nigger, then riddled with bullets. You did the work of men today, and your deeds will resound in every state, village, and hamlet.
I am a picker. It is my living and my avocation. I search out items that some people don't want or need, and then sell them to others who do. In America, everything is for sale, even a national shame. Until I came upon a postcard of a lynching, postcards seemed trivial to me, the way second-hand, misshapen Rubbermaid products might seem now. Ironically, the pursuit of these images has brought to me a great sense of purpose and personal satisfaction. Studying these photographs has engendered in me a caution of whites, of the majority, of the young, of religion, of the accepted. Perhaps a certain circumspection concerning these things was already in me, but surely not as actively as after the first sight of a brittle postcard of Leo Frank dead in an oak tree. It wasn't the corpse that bewildered me as much as the canine thin faces of the pack, lingering in the woods, circling after the kill. Hundreds of flea markets later, a trader pulled me aside and in conspiratorial tones offered to sell me a real photo postcard. It was Laura Nelson, hanging from a bridge, caught so pitiful and tattered and beyond retrieving, like a paper kite snagged on a utility wire. That image of Laura layered a pall of grief over all my fears. I believe the photographer was more than a perceptive spectator at lynchings. Too often they compulsively composed silvery tableaux, nature morte, positioning and lighting corpses as if they were game birds shot on the wing. Indeed, the photographic art played as significant a role in the ritual as torture or souvenir grabbing, creating a sort of two-dimensional biblical swine, a receptacle for a collective sinful self. Lust propelled the commercial reproduction and distribution of the images, facilitating the endless replay of anguish. Even dead, the victims were without sanctuary. These photographs provoke a strong sense of denial in me and a desire to freeze my emotions. In time, I realize that my fear of the other is fear of myself. Then these portraits, torn from other family albums, become the portraits of my own family and of myself. And the faces of the living and the faces of the dead recur in me and in my daily life. I've seen John Richards alone on a remote county road, rocking along in hobby horse strides, head low, eyes to the ground, spotting coins or rocks or roots. And I've encountered Laura Nelson in a small, sturdy woman who answered my knock on a back porch door. In her deep-set eyes, I watched a silent crowd parade across a shiny steel bridge, looking down. And on Christmas Lane, just blocks from our home, I've observed another Leo, a small-framed boy with his shirt tail out and skullcap off-center, as he made his way to Sabbath prayers. With each encounter, I can't help thinking of these photos and the march of time and of the cold steel trigger in the human heart.
I was cutting grass. I just happened to look up and there's two white gentlemen standing there, and I said, "Can I help you?" And they said, "Yes, we're looking for Anthony Ray Hinton." And they identified themselves as detectives. And they said, "We have a warrant for your arrest." And I said, "For what?" He said, "We're charging you with first-degree attempted murder, first-degree robbery, and first-degree kidnapping." I said, "Well, you got the wrong person. I ain't done none of that." And he continued to look at me and he said, "You know, I don't care whether you did it or didn't do it, but I'm gonna make sure you be found guilty of it. And there's 5 things that's going to convict you." He said, "Number 1, you're black. Number 2, a white man is gonna say you shot him. Whether you shot him or not, I don't care." He said, "Number 3, you're gonna have a white prosecutor. Number 4, you're gonna have a white judge. And number 5, more than likely you're gonna have an all-white jury." And he continued to look at me. And he said, "You know what that spell? Conviction, 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 conviction." And sure enough, they found me guilty. And so I went to death row for 30 years. I never did pray, "God, please free me." I thought that was selfish. But I didn't want the world to believe that my mom had raised a son that was capable of taking another human being's life. And so I asked God to let the truth come out. I knew if the truth would come out, then I would come out. And that's what happened. So when Mr. Stevenson came aboard, I said, I need you to hire a ballistic expert. Because they convicted me off ballistics, saying that the bullets that they retrieved from the victim body matched the gun that they got from my mother's house. And all three of them came to the same conclusion, that the bullets didn't match. And so with this, we go before the Attorney General and we asked him to re-examine the bullets. He refused to just take 1 hour and re-examine the bullets. I sit on death row an extra 16 years. All because my life was not worth re-examining the bullets for 1 hour. Years later, the United States Supreme Court did something that they never done in the history of the courts. They ruled in my favor. All 9 justices. And I've been out a year and a half, and no one have had the decency to say I'm sorry. But just like they would back in the lynching days. 2 white men came and got me, falsely accused me. It was a white mob that prosecuted me, a white judge that sentenced me, a white jury that convicted me. And so what changed? They brought it inside and created another way of execution. Went from the tree to the electric chair, from the electric chair to the gurney. When they come get you, they at least try to carry you to jail. And then in some cases, they kill you right there on the spot. Say you had a gun, say you went reaching for a gun. They took off the white robe and put on the black robe. At the end of the journey, they still put you to death. I lost not just 30 years, I lost the years with my mom, who passed September 22nd, 2002. When I came home, this house here was infested with mold. Some people thought they should just bulldoze it. But this is where I was when I was arrested. This is the home that my mom loved it so much. And out of respect for my mom and out of love for my mom, I said it could be fixed. And I am proud when I open that door, regardless of who is on the other side, that I can say, welcome to my home. It's not much, but it's mine. You are welcome here.
Abel wrote Strange Fruit as a poem. It was originally published in the Teachers Union publication and later became the song.
It was sometime in the late 30s.
That's right. We heard Strange...
Or the middle 30s even, you know, when
No, it wasn't
because
the
I
middle.
was, I'm sorry.
It was written in the late 30s.
Yeah, it was written...
So it was... Whenever those first performances were in... at the Teachers Union meeting.
At the Teachers Union meeting.
This was the kind of thing that when you heard, you couldn't applaud at first. You know, it was just so gripping.
I consider Abel as a pioneer. The fact that he could write the song that really became the anthem on lynching, and that it should come from the pen of a Jewish writer, I think is very significant and is symbolic of that period.
My father was most proud of Strange Fruit, of all the things he ever did. He was most proud of that.
He was a very gentle man and a very humorous person who was really not comfortable in public. He was ill at ease, but he felt things very deeply and very passionately.
And he saw a photograph of a lynching, and it then inspired him to write the poem. Maybe it was all up here, you know, but he said a picture inspired it.
Cafe Society's publicist hears Strange Fruit performed at one of the Theater Arts Committee cabarets. He subsequently arranges a meeting at Cafe Society between Barney Josephson, Abel Meeropol, and Billie Holiday. Meeropol plays the song for Holiday, and with encouragement from Josephson, she agrees to perform it. It is February 1939.
One of the amazing things to me about Meeropol writing Strange Fruit and getting it to Billie Holiday and then having it last the way it has as a song of racial protest is not that a Jewish person got a Jewish written song to a black performer, because that had been going on for decades at that point, but that the terms of that meeting were so different than they had ever been before.
There's this sense of the Jewish American being the middleman between the public, which has limited tolerance for blacks as a people, but kind of likes some of the cultural products of it, and the people and the culture and the music of black America, which kind of makes Strange Fruit really different. It's really different because what this Jewish American musician is being a middleman for is something quite militant.
The truly new thing about Strange Fruit is that it was more about popular front politics, about finding ways to give voice to racial protest, to social opposition to the dominant order, which none of the songwriters previously had even touched on.
It's the first step away from entertainment and towards expressing something a little more harder edged, more true to the negative side of being black and living in America.
Here is a fruit Here is a stream and
by the time Billie Holiday records Strange Fruit, it enters into the public discourse in both literature and painting about lynching. The anti-lynching movement had been going on for some time before the recording of Strange Fruit. There were anti-lynching campaigns throughout the United States. Strange Fruit became not just a song of protest, but a kind of elegiac song, a song of mourning. And it was a song that also sparked a kind of activism for Black communities.
There had been legislation introduced into Congress on many occasions to make lynching a federal offense. And each and every time it was filibustered or ruled over by Southern legislators.
During the 1940 effort to promote passage of a federal anti-lynching bill, the lyrics of Strange Fruit are sent to every member of Congress. Neither this tactic nor years of intensive lobbying by the NAACP ever succeeds. Federal anti-lynching legislation is never written into law.
Strange Fruit became a song that's been claimed by African Americans as part of an artistic tradition that's both beautiful, yet one born in protest. That was probably Billie Holiday's greatest contribution. She didn't write the song, but she certainly was a great communicator of that message.
I don't remember exactly when I heard Strange Fruit, but it caused a sensation in the neighborhood because they were lynching people in the South, and she dared to sing about it.
In Berlin today, you can't go 100 meters without seeing a marker or a stone that's been placed next to the home of a Jewish family that was abducted during the Holocaust. The Germans want you to go to the Holocaust Memorial because they want to express their awareness that something horrific happened and that it can never happen again. The Germans want to stand with Jews and say, never again. We have a 9/11 memorial in the United States. It took us less than 15 years to build that memorial. I think it's important. I think it's necessary that we memorialize and concretize what happened on that dreadful day. But it speaks to me about what we haven't done for the thousands of lynchings that defined a generation of people. We don't talk about slavery. We don't talk about lynching. We don't talk about segregation. We have to own up to the fact that there are places in this country where humans were trafficked, where there were slave auctions. We have to acknowledge the places. We have to recognize the places where terror lynchings took place. There aren't places you can go in this country and be confronted with the history of racial terror and violence and walk out and say, never again. And because nobody says never again, what we see happening is, well, it happening again. And so we have to do that truth-telling work. And then when we tell the truth, only when we've told the truth, can we begin the hard part of repair.
I am the great-great-granddaughter of Anthony Crawford, who was lynched October 21st, 1916. And my aunt's home, which was where we had our Thanksgiving dinners and Christmases, she owned the largest photograph of him in a permanent space over the dinner table. And they always pointed to him and said, walk with a sense of pride, because Grandpa Crawford stuck up for his rights to the time of his death. As a child, when we were told the story of Grandpa Crawford, he's like a king almost. We were told that he was born enslaved and had worked his way up to owning property and was wealthy. He started a school for the black children in Abbeville. He was the president of the Black Masons of South Carolina. And at the time of his death, Grandpa Crawford owned 427 acres of prime cotton land. So one day in 1916, it was a Saturday morning, Grandpa Crawford went to town to sell cotton seed, and they offered him 85 cents per unit. It was worth more. He said, give me my damn cottonseed back, and was arrested for cursing a white man. Word had gotten around town that Anthony Crawford had started acting uppity. And so about 400 people gathered, taking Grandpa out of the jail. They stabbed him, beat him, tied him to the back of the buggy and drug that around town to the county fairgrounds. They hung him there and riddled his body with 200 bullets. The last thing he said was, I thought I was a good citizen and give my bank book to my children. The family tried to retrieve the body and were told to leave it there. So if you could imagine your grandfather being at home eating breakfast with the children, laughing, and then all of a sudden he's hanging from a tree with 200 bullets in him, that's a form of terrorism. And then there was an ad taken in the newspaper by white citizens. And they said that the Crawford family needed to leave the state of South Carolina, otherwise everybody's life was in danger. My great-great-uncle, Walter, Grandpa's oldest son, wrote Governor Richard I. Manning and asked him for protection. Governor Manning wrote back and said while he deplored the lynching, he could not guarantee our safety. So my family didn't leave the South. They were chased away from the South. We moved to Evanston, Illinois, and not only did the Crawfords leave, but half of the black population of Abbeville was gone within the next 10 years. I haven't spent a lot of time in the South. The first time I went to Abbeville was the first time I could understand what 427 acres looks like. And that's when I think I got really offended. That's the day I became an activist. I came home and I started writing congressmen, and I'm saying, do you know that our family was kicked off this property for this? These are unsolved murders. And people who benefited from lynchings, their families are still alive, and they're still benefiting financial rewards from the land of our ancestors. And that just seems a shame. So from Grandpa to Emmett to Trayvon, the trajectory of lynching history has shifted over time in America. Because when Grandpa was killed in 1916, there was no charges brought and no trial. In 1955, Emmett Till's murder, there was a trial but no convictions. And then Trayvon Martin, now you have a trial and a not guilty verdict. So all the time you have dead black bodies, and nobody's ever convicted for the murders. On the 100th anniversary of Grandpa Crawford's lynching, we went back to Abbeville. Over 200 family members came from all over the United States to help unveil the marker dedicated to Grandpa Crawford's lynching. And I remember Grandpa's granddaughter, one of the only living grandchildren, was next to me in a wheelchair. And when we took the cover off of the marker, she looked at the picture of him. I saw her face light up, and I heard her say, my, my, my. And to watch her enjoy that moment, that meant the world to me. So the marker being in Abbeville is important because the story has been denied for so long. But now, if you go to Abbeville City Hall to do business, You had to walk right past Anthony Crawford to do it. You can't bypass him anymore.